Señoras y señores, buenas tardes.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is our pleasure to present the conference Botanical References in the Quran that will be given by Shahina Gazahandar, who is an expert in the flora and vegetation in Middle East. In the Casa Árabe, we think it is very important to contribute to the better knowledge of the Quran, not only from the religious point of view, but also from other perspectives such as literature, laws, and the society, and culture, and science. When the Council of Science told us about the possibility of organizing this conference, we thought it was very interesting to be able to offer a reading of the sacred book that is different from the traditional perspective. To get closer to the Quran from the point of view of botany is a novelty for the general public and for more specialized experts who study botany and even those who study Islam. To have a presentator such as Shahina Gazahandar is a great privilege for us. She is one of the main researchers of the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew of London. She has focused on the study, preservation, and biogeography of the plants of Middle East and Asia. She's got a PhD by the University of Cambridge and a Master in Science that she undertook in the University of Punjab in Pakistan. She has worked in Oman and the Sultan Qaboos University in Nigeria, Bayero University, Fiji Islands, University of the South Pacific, Pakistan, at the Pakistan Agricultural Research, Cultural and Kennard College. And she has undertaken important contributions to the study of flora in those countries. She has published several books on the flora of Iraq, Oman, Equatorial Africa, and different articles on the vegetation of Middle East and the Arabian Peninsula. We hope that this conference will make us more familiar with the Quran, with different aspects of the Quran. Many of you will be surprised to see that all of these plants that are mentioned in the sacred book are present in the Iberian Peninsula and are part of our diet and the surroundings of our geography. For example, olive, figs, pomegranates, and palm trees. It is an example that is very significant, and it allows us to know that culturally, Orient, the East and the West are closer than what we imagine, and they share more than what we think. I would like to thank the Royal Botanic Garden and his director, Jesus Muñoz, and the vice presidents of scientific investigation, Cristina de la Puente, who is with us today, and also thanking them for the dissemination of this information among researchers, allowing us to get closer to the scientific enrichment of the Arabic world. I'm now going to give the floor to the director of the Botanical Garden, Royal Botanical Garden, Jesus Muñoz. For me, it is a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon in this conference with Dr. Gazahandar at this topic. And for us, our gardens have similarities with the Kew Gardens. We are smaller than them. We don't do as many things as they do, but we have a long tradition that runs parallel to theirs, with the collection of plants, economy, botany, and also with regard to the topic that we're going to be talking about today, the plants, their uses, and their presence in sacred texts. Dr. Gazahandar, as the director has explained, is the head of the team of the Asian flora in Kew. She has a long experience with regard to the Middle East flora, and her contributions are not only very specific economic flora or the flora that is related to sacred text. She has been also working on the Iraq, Oman, or tropical, oriental Africa flora, etc. And she has a long experience in taxonomy, floristic. So she has not only focused on historical or economic issues with regard to plants, she's gone beyond. She's also the author of many articles, someone that is widely acknowledged in this sphere. I would also like to highlight, for those of you who don't know it, probably most of you, the Royal Botanical Garden has never worked with regard to Asia. We are more focused on Latin America for cultural reasons, and we have important collections of plants that are similar to those that Dr. Ghazanfar studies. But sadly, we don't have anyone at our garden to study these collections. We don't have anyone as specialized as she is. Some of these plants grew here in different, or came from different colonies in South America, and they've been cultivated. Now, we do have some live collections that were cultivated after they were brought here to Spain with these expeditions. This is also interesting to take into account the differences between Kew Gardens and our botanic garden. Without further ado, I would like to thank Casa Árabe for their invitation, and I will now give the floor to Cristina de la Puente. Thank you very much. It is an honor for me to represent the Scientific and Technical Research Council. Some years ago, I taught Arabic agriculture and botany at university. It's not really my expertise, but it is a topic that I'm very, very fond of, and I follow many publications. I would like to thank Casa Árabe for opening their doors to the CSIC, the Scientific Council. Thank you to Barbara Wok and Dr. Ghazanfar. They've had a small collaboration with the CSIC, and they've also wanted to present some of the results of their project here. And to the Royal Botanic Garden, who is always very welcoming to visitors that come from other expertise. In the case of the areas of humanities, natural resources, I would say that the collaboration is really incredible for two reasons. We have some common topics that can be studied from different perspectives. We had exhibition on wine, research on wine. We have different 8 areas, scientific areas of the CSIC that collaborated in this exhibition, and this exhibition took place in the Botanic Gardens. And when people think about the Scientific Council, people normally think about the institutions, the different departments, but a lot of people do not know that the Botanic Gardens belong in a certain way to the CSIC. Some people, at the same time, the Council has incredible collections of Hazid, with documental collections. The tradition is very long. In the 18th century, the Botanic Gardens were created, and the collections that we have date from, in some cases, that era. But in Spain, sadly, we don't always have the resources that are necessary to be able to maintain heritage. It's good to know that the doors are open for our researchers, for researchers from other countries, so that these funds that we have at the CSIC are available to all these people, and we invite you to visit our institutions. I would like to finish by thanking all the institutions that are present, especially to Professor Ghazanfar for her visit, and I would like to give her the floor because I'm really eager to hear her presentation. Just one moment. We're going to sit down so that we can follow the presentation better and see the slides. Thank you very much.
This, and I hope that's clear. Well, thank you very much I have to now remember these names, to the director of the Institute, to the director of the Botanic Garden, and of course to Christina, the director of the Institute, through which I have been able to come, Mark Nesbitt and myself, which we have been able to at least make contact with Barbara and Ignacio. Both of them have been extremely helpful in, well, as far as my work was concerned, but also in our study of the other plants which have been mentioned, a couple in the Quran. Now, my interest in looking at the Quranic plants basically came from the time of my association with the Middle Eastern countries. The Middle Eastern countries are quite poor in taxonomy. I mean, they can understand, they can look at plants, but for them to be able to identify them correctly is not that easy. So when such things happen in many countries, they always look to Kew. So they will send the plants to the Kew Gardens for us to identify them correctly. Over the last maybe about 5 or 6, or maybe a little bit longer than that, there was a big wave of trying to make Quranic gardens in the Middle Eastern countries, especially in the UAE, in the United Arab Emirates, in Qatar, and in Oman. When it actually came down to constructing these gardens, a lot of the principles were followed, which were of the Persian gardens, of the more Islamic type of gardens, mainly looking back in Persia. But when it came down to planting these with the plants of the Quran, there was a very large problem. Some of the plants are very well known. I mean, they have classical Arabic names, which you can identify very, very easily through classical literature. But some of the plants that are mentioned in the Quran are quite difficult, and there was a lot of debate on whether this plant is this or this name belongs to this particular plant. Now, there is a belief, a very strong belief, that most of the plants that are mentioned in the Quran are found or come from the Middle East, especially from where Islam started, which is sort of Saudi Arabian sort of region. Now, we can't be far from the truth, because the plants that I mentioned in the Quran have come from everywhere, as we will see. Now, in the Quran as such, so just to go back, that when these kind of questions started to occur as to what were the names or what were the correct identifications of some of the plants that had to be planted in the gardens, they obviously looked at Q, and since I was there, they asked me. And I started to look into this, because obviously you don't want to go wrong whereas these plants are concerned. And I realized that we need to do a little bit more study into each one of the names that are doubtful or have not been completely investigated. And that is why I started this work. I haven't finished in the entire 20 or 22 plants that are mentioned in the Quran. And the number of plants are very few, but each one of them, apart from a few, they're only mentioned once in the Quran. And to fully identify them, because they're only mentioned once, and they're not mentioned in the context of how we know them. Like, for example, garlic is only mentioned once, and it is not known, or it is not mentioned that this is bad smelling, or you put it, or it is medicinal. It's mentioned in a completely different metaphorical context. So that makes it even more difficult, or more interesting, I should say, to investigate these plants. So as far as the Quran is concerned, there are 20 plants which are mentioned. And in the hadith, and probably most of you may be familiar with what the hadith is, these were the narrations which were compiled together quite a long time later after the death of Prophet Muhammad, almost in the 9th or the 10th centuries. And these were narrations which were collected by scholars of Arabic, obviously, and who followed Islam quite closely. The hadith comes in two forms. One is the narration itself, and one is the source of the narration, simply to give some sort of a meaning so that these could be traced. Now, because they came so late, and they were believed to be part of the sayings of the Prophet and how he lived, what he used, what he did. But of course, these were several hundred years, 200 or 300 years later. So a lot more plants have been added. And it is believed that in the hadith, there are a compilation of plants which is known as the medicine of the Prophet, Tib al-Nabwi. And it is believed that during the time of Prophet Muhammad, he either used them or he suggested that their use was beneficial. So those are the Tib al-Nabwi, and quite a number of people will use those plants quite religiously, and they will consider it as a blessing, or sunnah, as we call it. The plants which are obviously difficult, a lot of suggestions have been made, and as to what they are. Just to compare it with the Bible and the Old and the New Testaments, there are a lot more plants that are mentioned in the Bible, 130 plants. And many of these plants are kind of generic, trees, nettles, grasses, rather than as specific names. And many of them, of course, overlap. In fact, most of the plants that are mentioned in the Quran have been mentioned in the Bible. I would just like to take one shared traditions that the Muslims and the Old Testament is that I should say is a shared tradition. We, the Muslims, also believe in Bilqis, or the Queen of Sheba, and this legend of her being invited by Solomon. And if you look on the far right-hand corner, there's a little bird, the hoopoe, which brings in, I don't have a pointer, but it's just right underneath the acacia tree, who brings in a message to Bilqis. And there is Bilqis, who's sort of nicely relaxing under a tree, and a little rivulet of water flowing by, a few plants at the back. And I wondered if there was a meaning to this painting. This painting is quite, it was done in Iran, quite in the 16th century, and it is present in the British Museum. And I just thought that later on, did the plants get some sort of a meaning? Is the painting saying something? So the Acer is the plant or the tree under which Bilqis is reclining. Basically, when you look at it, this is how it is represented. Retirement, it's constraint. So perhaps the artist wanted to show that she wasn't, really enthusiastic to go. She was showing sort of restraint or sophistication. Irises, which is the orange, the purple flower in the middle, right there. I do not know whether I don't have a point. It doesn't point through here. And that is faith, wisdom, and friendship. And that shows Bilqis as a very, wise lady, as a very wise person who wanted to get friendship with Solomon. Althea, which is the hollyhock, shows ambition and aspiration. Of course, that also shows Bilqis's aspiration. The acacia, which is the tree under which the hoopoe is sitting, is platonic love or concealed love or secret love. These are the sort of understanding of and that could be that Bilqis was really showing her love for King Solomon. Whether this is true or whether it is not, but this is the sort of interpretation that we have. Oh, yeah, that's very good. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Then I wanted to bring forth some of the well, I don't want to say difficulties because there are no difficulties. You can solve them all. There are always interesting things that you have to be aware of during interpretation, and that is looking at paintings. This painting is from the National Gallery of Edinburgh. It's done by Raphael during the 15th century Italian, and it is the Holy Family with a palm tree. Now, if you look at the palm tree, which is right here, now this palm tree, which should really be a date palm, and it's not. It's completely a different species, a different genus. This is probably Washingtonia or some other fan palm. So you cannot rely on the paintings for information or for truthful information. Also, when these paintings are done, and over here I show this is strawberry. This probably is found there. But this plant, as Joseph is giving to Jesus a platter of strawberries or a fruit, which was very traditional, but these fruits or plants are simply not found in the Arabian Peninsula at all, not even remotely connected to it. So again, these are some of the interesting aspects of when you are looking at translations. Sometimes you have to rely on many sources, and paintings is one of the sources, but not always the most accurate. Now, my argument or rather one of my arguments is that religious texts like the Hadith, like the Bible, the Torah, and as well the Qur'an, they are a very good source of preserving the cultural value of plants. The cultural value of plants is completely lost when you take one plant and take it out of its natural habitat and grow it somewhere else. And it's done all the time. But there is a certain culture that is associated with a particular plant. It may be that the smell of it, you smell it in the morning, like jasmine, for example. It may be that the dewdrops on jasmine are very good for your eyes. I mean, there are lots of myths that can never be transported. And I think it is one of the duties, perhaps, or recommendations of Botanic Gardens to trace back the history of plants and to give a story of some of the important plants which have moved or had been moved from their original locations. And if this story is present, to be able for the other people to enjoy the small culture that is associated with it. I always go for conservation, which is, again, a very passionate thing for me. And to preserve habitats, of course, is the best way to preserve plants. But, that is nowadays, things will always move, plants will always move. And therefore, I believe And I strongly believe that religious text is one of the ways in which a culture can be preserved that is associated with some of the plants. Now, again, the movement of plants, I talk a little bit about the movement of plants, and this is at least documented, one of the oldest or the earliest botanical gardens, about 3,000 years ago, in Egypt, planned by Necht, who was the head gardener at that time. And basically, it was a royal garden, so it is believed there are some designs over there. And doom palm, most of the plants were for pleasure, but there were other things like wine and lotus, which were also grown over there, which were moved from other areas, especially vine, which is not indigenous, not native to Egypt. The thing with the Greeks was, Greeks were excellent, absolutely excellent in the description, but they did not have a botanic garden. And the botanic garden was that of Aristotle, it was used as a teaching garden. They didn't make botanic gardens. And this Aristotle's garden at Athens was left to Theophrastus, and who obviously equipped it and based the first of his texts of De Historia Plantarum on the garden, in which he listed about 500 plants. In Iraq, which is my area of study at the moment, but not in any cultural form or thing, I'm just continuing on writing the Flora of Iraq. This has been taken from a source by Stephanie Daly, who's published a book on the mysteries of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And again, it was always, they were called the mysterious gardens, never known exactly where they actually grew. And she looked under the cuneiform tablets, listing the plants and so on, and basically described that it was in Nineveh rather than in Babylon, and had a very sophisticated watering system, also identified that there was a canal or not a river, but certainly water canal nearby where the water was transmitted through the Archimedes, which is a screw right up into the top, watering the areas which were right sort of around in this area and cascading down through this Archimedes screw. And just recently I went to an exhibition on Oriental Gardens in Paris, and over there they have actually constructed this Archimedes screw to take the water up and water the gardens. So that is, and of course, this is almost 600 to 700 BC. There were plants which were planted over there. Some of the plants have been identified. Some of the plants still need to be known as to what was growing there. One of the first collectors, as we know it, which is documented, of course, plants have moved before the Chinese, but good documentation is given by the emperor, the Han, and during the Han Emperor Wu Ti, who was, as some people say, was the starter of botanic gardens. So not necessarily of their own native gardens, but of exotic botanic gardens. And he dispatched people all over the world, well, especially through the legendary Silk Route into Asia and into the southern parts, and established gardens bringing back the plants from all these areas. And if you look at the map from here, which is Xinjiang, right up, all these routes are the old Silk Roads going into the Mediterranean, going down into India, into New Delhi, crossing the Punjab, So all what was available, especially those plants that were of importance, economic importance, were brought back and planted in, and it is, Wu Ti is described as the introduction of several plants to the Silk Road. For example, vine, which is originally found in Georgia, in the pomegranate, originally from Iran, Balochistan, and part of the what is now Uzbekistan, Tajikistan area, Kyrgyzstan. Safflower, which is the bastard saffron, that comes from Iraq, from the Fertile Crescent. the cucumber, Indian, walnut coming from Iran, and of course coriander, very much Mediterranean, Southwest Asian plant. So all these were introduced a long time ago, but through these Silk Routes where the emperor sent his people to bring back. So coming to the plants that are mentioned in the Quran, there are 13 plants that are food plants, and these are the date palm, olive, grape, pomegranate, fig, ginger. Lentils is more a compound name, but we believe that it is the oldest form of lens. Culinaris, onion, garlic, watermelon or melon, we do not know exactly, citrulus or cucumis, gourd, the legionaria, mustard, and basil. Now, these can be traced back to some extent and can be identified. There are 7 plants which are more difficult to identify. One is considered as mana. Now, some people believe that it is a plant. Some people believe that it is the exudate coming from tamarix, which was very sweet in nature, and that was mana. Tamarix or athal, what species of tamarix? Whether it was Aphila or other couple of species which were found in that region. Cedar or sidr, now this is a big controversy. Sidr is mentioned in the Quran, and the context in which it is written in the Quran that it has arms which are very wide. It is a very majestic tree. Ziziphus spina Christi is nowhere like that, and it is believed that this tree probably is the cedar of Lebanon, of the very beautiful tree which fits more in the context. But I think the word sidr, I need to look more, and I hope we can get the cooperation of both the gardens and the Institute to look some of the older text which mention or may mention Cedrus libani. The toothbrush tree is another one. Now, everybody thinks that it is Salvadora persica, and if you go for Hajj, for the pilgrimage, these are always, they will bring back the little sticks of the toothbrush tree. Again, it is not absolutely certain whether khatam, the name which is used in the Quran, refers to the toothbrush tree or not, because it's not mentioned that take this plant and brush your teeth. That's not mentioned. Acacia, again, whether it is Sayal or Acacia radiana, and then there is a tree of hell, Zukum, Shajarate al-Zukum, whether it is, some of the people put it as a euphorbia species, and some people still say that it is just symbolic. I have not been able to figure out, but again, it is something that needs to be investigated and investigated fully, whether it is mythical or whether there is something which you can put a name of Zukum. Many times the plants or shrubs that are mentioned in the Quran are always in a collective manner. So there are trees, Shajar al-Akhtar, green trees, Shajar al-Tuba, that are the trees in paradise, Shajar al-Minzukum, these are trees of hell. They are mentioned as in agriculture, and not as agriculture per se, but aflaha, which is to prosper, to prosper, grow and prosper. To be fortunate, you should grow plants or it be like this, metaphorically. Nabat, again, Rauda as meadows, Mara, pastures where take your flocks where they may feed in that. After, as rewards of the afterlife, there are 2 gardens which are mentioned. Jannah, the Jannat or paradise, where there'll be grape vines surrounded by palm trees and cultivated fields. I mean, this is a beautiful scenario, as you can imagine for anyone. But they're always as the Jannah. There are no mentions of particular trees over there. And also in paradise or afterlife, it is mentioned in the 2nd surah, verse 25, that gardens under which rivers flow. And I think it probably refers to the underground watering system, which is a very ancient watering system, both in Iraq, and it was in Persia, in Iran, and it came through the Persians, it was, of course, then used in Arabia. It is still used in Arabia. In fact, the photograph that I have is from Oman, from Nizwa, where there is an underground channel. And then, of course, there were wells which were made, the Qanat system so probably this refers to the underground rivers, meaning that there will be water. There will be water there. And Harth al-Akhira, which is the cultivated fields, basically showing abundance. I'm just going to look at 3 plants because obviously, the time limits and which I have worked on, or 3 or 4 plants, I think today. These are olive date and the grape. These are the 3 most frequently mentioned plants, and they're always many times grouped together. Whenever there is a mention in the Quran, it's always they're grouped together, and always metaphorically. They have been used for wisdom, as a blessing from God, as a light to show you again for wisdom, and also to conservation. Do not cut the trees, do not uproot it, because they give you the food. Especially it is mentioned in the Quran for after wars, do not destroy the date palm. So some of I shall go quite quickly over it. Date palms is mentioned 20 times as a food plant for enjoyment, for shade, for wisdom, as also to help in childbirth, because it is believed that Mary clung onto or had the dates when she was given, and also as fiber, as hubble to wear or to put on livestock. In the Bible, it is used for holiness, always resurrection, justice, and righteousness. In the Hadith, it is a fruit, always the date palm itself, and it says, don't miss an evening meal, even eat a few dates. The grape is mentioned several times in several forms, as inab, which is the fruit, khamar, which is the like a vinegar or the fermented part of it, sakar, which is again the fermented part, as kasan, as an intoxicant. And in the Quran, actually, it's not mentioned completely forbidding the use of fermented grape or fermented juice. It is most mentioned in the Hadith to be banned over there, and even the gifting of wine is not allowed in the Hadith, and but not so in the Quran. It's associated with wisdom, enjoyment. It's associated with good thinking, and also abstinence from intoxication. But it doesn't say, do not. It is haram. That words are not actually used in the Quran itself. In the Bible, of course, it's bounty, abundance, because of the way it is mentioned in there. Olive is mentioned several times with other fruits, zaytun, and always as a blessed and a useful tree, because it bears light. The oil of it, you can use that. In the Bible, always as peace, and of course in the Hadith, very similar. But the medicinal parts or medicinal uses of it come more in that. Of course, as we will know from Barbara, probably it does have medicinal uses long before as well. Pomegranate is another one, which is a symbol of paradise. Do not be wasteful. It's also always used when you harvest the pomegranate, give some to your friends, give some to the poor. Distribute the trees. In the context of the Bible, it is fertility and beauty, always for women it's used, but not for, and in the Hadith as just as a blessed fruit. Fig or altin, just mentioned once. And it's quite an important mention because it says, by fig and olive and Mount Sinai, we have indeed created man in the best mold. That means these fig and the olive are very much associated with creation of man. They have given a very important state or a stage in the Quran. In the Bible, it's prosperity and peace, and in the Hadith, it's of course the fruit of paradise, but as a medicinal plant to help cure arthritis or hemorrhoids. Mustard, again, khardal, just mentioned once in the Quran. I've just taken these two because these are quite important one. And in the context of the Quran, it is, again, just metaphorically, and it says if you on the day of judgment, even if there will be no more than a weight of mustard, if the justice is not correct, we will bring you, just showing that even if there was that much doubt, it will be, you have to answer for it. In the context of the Bible, it's quite different. Mustard seed is compared to the kingdom of God. It's very small, but it grows and multiplies, so it's quite a different. In the Hadith, again, it's quite different, and it says, whoever has pride, even as small as a mustard, will not be allowed in paradise. So it's a different sort of a meaning, but a little bit similar to of the Quran. Now I'll talk a little bit about the date palm. It is, as I said, it's the most frequently mentioned plant. It's mentioned 20 places in 16 surahs, and 8 times it is just mentioned by itself. So it's quite an important plant, and I can imagine because it was the most abundant and a very useful tree in the desert areas. It's mentioned in different forms as linat, naqir, kitnir, nawa, al-arjan, different forms of the plant. And there's a very old Arab saying, it says, the uses of the date palm are as many as the days in the year, and they're used for everything. Every part of the date palm is used, even today, although the uses are becoming less and they're becoming more modernized. But if you go into the villages, yes, they are used extensively. It is one of the first trees, apparently, or has been now researched to be domesticated, and it goes back to 8,000 to 10,000 years. And this was the work which has been done by the University of Oxford in their Department of Archaeology, where they have excavated and looked at some of the areas in the movement of people from Africa into Europe. And they have looked at some of the places where many of the, I suppose, the tribes rested and domesticated or grew the date palm. And rock paintings have been found in Bir Hima, for example, clearly showing the date palms and showing the more native form, which is not very common to see now, because the date, as you probably know, grows through suckers, so you have young trees growing from the base. And over here, in this particular rock painting, you can see the young trees with the older one. And of course, always been described, Iraq has always been described as a land of many, many, many dates. And again, it says it's one of the trees, the first trees to be cultivated in the Old World, mainly in the deserts. And under domestication, it was well known, and this I thank Ignacio for correcting the time of my the 2300 BC, which was found from in cuneiform text, and they already knew that the date palms come as 2 different, the male and the female, and they knew how the pollination should happen, and the domestication was well known. It was such an important tree that it was minted on the coins, and this is a coin which is in the Islamic room in the British Museum, and it has a date palm. It doesn't much look like a date palm over here, but this has been minted in 700 AD in there. And of course, because of the importance, there are many coins which bear the date palm, and not just that. It has been used repeatedly as a gravestone, people resting under this tree of paradise. These are from Turkey, and this is from Greece. Coming to grape, which is, of course, has quite a different origin as the date palm. And in the Quran, the reference to the grape is always made with different aspects of life and ethics. It talks with rainwater, which brings life into the earth. So we shall bring down rain, and there will be life from there. It is also associated with wisdom, enjoyment, good thinking, and abstinence from intoxication. Grape was, of course, as you can imagine, was very important, because not only did it have the juice, it also had, it was sweet. So these were dried and then used as for the sweet. The origin of the name was a little bit not as easy. Anab is the Arabic name, but the Akkadian name is Inbu, again, thanks to Ignacio, who told me about it. In Hebrew, it's called Inav. The Farsi name, however, is angur, which is a little bit different from the Arabic name. The grape comes from Georgia. It doesn't come from the east. It comes very much from the Central European areas. This word, the closest that I could get to was the Greek word, but that is for cucumber, anguri. Whether there was a misunderstanding or misinterpretation, I do not know. But the origin of angur, which is the Persian, that is not fully known. So I need to look a little bit more among the Sogdian words, or perhaps the other words. There may be some. There is a place which is just over here, and apparently, or most likely, named after the wine. Again, archaeological record suggests that the cultivation of domesticated grape, this is the Vitis vinifera, subspecies vinifera, happened 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, so it's a very, very old plant indeed, and it was domesticated from its wild form, which is Vitis vinifera, subspecies sylvestris. And then, of course, a lot of work has been done on grape. As you can well imagine, it is very, very important in winemaking. And there have been a lot of now molecular work and evidence to say that the origin of the grape was in the Near East. And this probably is one of its oldest places where it originated. And now both the viticulture, they were already known in Egypt and Mesopotamia by 3000 BC. So there are lots of evidence on frescoes and murals which show that, bringing wine and growing there. And as well, this was a very different Persia, very different Iran from what we have today. Wine was used, and it was gifted as a gift to the more important gods. The Chinese received the wine through, of course, the missions of, I do not know whether it is Khan or Qian, around through the expeditions of, or during the Han dynasty. And you can see that once the wine came to China, there are definitely wine cups, and this is one of them. It has completely different shape to the other tea or other drinking cups. So these are definitely the wine cups that were introduced during that time and still exist. Olive, which is zaytun. Now this is, of course, a very, very important, a very Mediterranean fruit, which we all love and we are very familiar with. And it in the Quran, it is always light, wisdom, blessed in its context. This was slightly more easier to find because of its classical Arabic name, zaytun, which is also the one which is used in the Quran. Probably originating from the zaita, which is Aramaic, Hebrew zait, may have been borrowed from zirdun or serdu from the Akkadian, but the root, you can actually see that it is fairly similar. And due to the spread of Islam, the word was transferred to many, many more languages from the Mediterranean to Africa and Asia. And of course, the Spanish aceituna, the olive, comes very much from aizatun, as you can see the connection between the languages. The English word olive is from the Latin olivia, the Greek coming from Greek, and from the Mycenaean alevia. And there is actually now a specimen in the Burlington House, which was used by Linnaeus, who we consider as the father of giving names, binomial or giving Latin names to all the plants, in 1753. And there is a plant which is the reference plant on which this name is based, Olea Europaea. And you can have a look at it if you come to London in the Linnean Herbarium. It is one of the most classical trees of the Mediterranean, and we know this from excavations from Santorini, where fossil leaves have been found almost dating back to 37,000 years. So it is quite clearly a tree of the Mediterranean. And these leaves or impressions or the fossilized trees are quite distinctly olive leaves. There's nothing, and Santorini is a beautiful place to visit, I suppose, if you were to go. Leafy branches of olive have been used always as a symbol of glory and of peace, and that has always been associated with olive. Garlands of olive leaves have been found in Tutankhamun's tomb, and there is an example of this which I gave. And of course, the sacred temples were burnt with olive oil, which was in the Grecian times. It is again by one of the oldest known cultivated plants around 3,000 or so years ago. And carbonized trees or stones have been found in the Jordan Valley, in the area of Palestine, Jerusalem, dating back to 3,500 years. So it was very much in cultivation before that, and in use, very much so. And over the years, it is still considered as a symbol of peace, of wisdom, and of glory. And as we all know, it was one of the first branches which was brought back after the floods receded in the Noah. And the Noah, of course, he looks so happy over here in this particular illustration. The last one that I'm going to mention is going to be pomegranate. And pomegranate, of course, is again a very important plant, not just for its mention in the Quran, but also in its uses. In them will be fruits, the dates, and pomegranates. So it's mentioned together with dates, making it quite an important. But whereas dates is indigenous to the Arabian Peninsula or to Iraq area, pomegranate comes from a completely different region. The name of pomegranate is Rumman, and that is how it is mentioned in the Quran. The Persian name for this is anar, which is a little bit different from it is. The flower is called gulnar. Gul is a flower, and nar is from the word anar. And literally, it's the flower of pomegranate, which is a very beautiful flower, and a lot of girls are named Gulnar. The anar can be traced back to Sogdia, again from the ancient cities of Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. And the Sogdian word for it is read as narak, or naraka, and that probably is the origin of the extant Persian name anar. The Mongols use it, the Western Chinese, the Uyghur, the Ur people, they use the name Nara. And several other sort of Eastern countries like the Azeri, Hindi, Kurdish, Urdu, we all use the word anar as it. But the name that is in the Quran is Rumman, which is the Hebrew name. The Chinese name for it dates back to 202, and the name Liu or Ru is the name which is given in it. Or Zoliu, Zak, or Niak, Li, Ru, and that is the ones which have been given in the dictionary, and that is about, through the time when this fruit was brought back. The Mysians, almost 1100 BC, they called it Roai, or Roiko, or Roishkoi, in that way. I don't think so. I'm pronouncing it correct. In Akkadian is it Nurmu, Hebrew Rimon, Amharic Rumana, Syriac Rumano, and Arabic Ruman. So we can see the origin of the Arabic name. It comes more from the Akkadian, more from there. And from there, of course, Armani, which is Egyptian, Armani, or the Coptic or Herman, these have been derived. That is, we have already spoken about how it came from Persia to China. It is also quite a celebrated fruit in China. But there is no extant ancient Persian word for pomegranate. And the Chinese term tanzo, or danzak, or danyak, or danyak could have been derived. These are some of the terms which are used by the Chinese. And it is believed that the Persian word dana, or danak, which is just a grain, is the origin of some of the ancient Chinese name for pomegranate. And the Malayalam name of Delima or Dalima or Daniaka again come from the old Persian work, small grain or dana, which is still used, which we use it in many, just the dana. The English, of course, word comes from Latin pome, which is the apple, granate from granatus, the pome apple. Again, it's one of the oldest fruits which is known to man. Excavations long, long time ago brought to Egypt via Syria around 600. I'm not sure of this, but it is believed that that's how it came, and where it was used medicinally as a dye. And it is believed that about 1,000 Solomon's temple was decorated with pomegranates, and this is mentioned in the Torah. In 700 BC, it came to Italy through Carthage, so it was called Punic, and that was how it was called the Punic apple, or Punic malum, or the Punic, because it came through that area, or came through that region. The Moors, of course, took it to Spain, so it's there. It was around 800 AD, and where they cultivated in Granada. And then it came to Britain through the marriage of Catherine of Aragon. And I understand, I was reading about the Catherine of Aragon when she came to Britain, when she came as the queen to King Henry VIII. She was very disappointed that there were no pomegranates. So pomegranates were brought in and cultivated from that time, the sort of 15th century, from King Henry. So the pomegranate in ancient Persia, where it sort of originates, is a symbol of eternal life. It always is a symbol of strength amongst the Persian culture. And because it has got so many leaves and it's of a beautiful, when you open it, it's considered as a symbol of fertility, of prosperity, and righteousness, especially for sort of rebirth in a way, is used for Egyptians and pomegranates. And by the Prophet Muhammad, he's used it to purge your body and spirit of jealousy and hate. Eat a pomegranate or consider that. Don't waste it. And the references are always for blessing as a symbol of paradise, and do not be excessive or wasteful, conserve it. And these are given in these particular surahs. So this information that I am trying to gather, eventually they will go into a book, which is the plants of the Quran, the history and significance. I've been very fortunate to get Sue Wikison. She's an illustrator, absolutely. She does botanical drawings, and she sent me, as you can see, it is not fully complete, and she doesn't have the open pomegranate over here, but she allowed me to use her incomplete painting for this talk. And I hope that during my lifetime, I'd be able to complete this book, to make it available, not just as a book to celebrate really the plants, the life of plants, and the plants mentioned in different in the Quran and in different texts, but also to look at the significance and how important they are, not just just because they're mentioned, but because they have been started, or they have been sort of carried on culture by culture by culture through a very long period of time. And basically to conserve in each part of the world the culture they hold, which I hope this book will convey at some stage. Yeah, I'm hoping to complete it in a couple of years, but I know when you start looking at these things, it just goes beyond research. So thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to thank the Casa Arabi, the director, the Botanic Gardens, and the Institute for their tremendous help and their hospitality, in fact, and to bring both Mark and myself over here from Kew. So thank you very much indeed.